So today we're asking one of the biggest and most uncomfortable questions about love. Why do we cheat?
For me, what happens in affairs, why affairs are really around that 40s, kind of early 50s mark, is because we lose connection to an earlier self. This is what I would hear in my clinic all the time.
Yeah.
And they reconnect you with an earlier self where you were funny, you were having a, you know what I mean, you were a better self was there, and you lose yourself, I think, in that 40s. And then when you meet somebody, or if you're on a holiday, or you're out with the lads golfing, or whatever goes on, and you have a one-night stand, or whatever it is, it's kind of frenzied because you've met someone who made you feel good about yourself.
I'm Jennifer Zamparelli, and today I'm joined by Dr. Richard Hogan, psychotherapist, family counsellor, and best-selling author. He has a new book coming out soon. For an honest, nuanced, and compassionate conversation about infidelity, why good people sometimes make bad decisions, what affairs are really about, and how betrayal changes us, and whether trust can ever be rebuilt after it's been broken. Before things heat up, a little love for our sponsor, Kildare Village. We're all for sparks flying when the curtains are closed. But sure, look, it's no harm to take yourself out for a bit of excitement too. With over 100 boutiques, including 60 you won't find anywhere else in Ireland, and 20 new brands to tempt you, a visit to Kildare Village is shopping that's so Irish. And if that wasn't enough, here's something special. We are giving five lucky listeners the chance to each win a pair of tickets to an exclusive live recording of Just Between Us with me, Jennifer Zamparelli, in the beautiful surroundings of Kildare Village. So you can bring your favourite plus one along for stylish night out. Head to independent.ie for your chance to enter, and good luck. Richard, you're very welcome back.
Thank you very much. It's great to be back.
Thank you. Thank you for doing this. I know you're a very busy man, so I really appreciate you doing
No worries
this.
at all.
You've counselled countless couples through the aftermath of affairs and infidelity. So let's start with this. What is the biggest misconception people have about cheating?
The good and the bad, kind of, you know, that one person is bad and one person is good.
Okay.
And it's way more nuanced and complicated than that, you know what I mean?
Surely the person who cheats is the bad person, is the person in the wrong?
Well, you see, it's very complicated, the reasons why we cheat. And people break it down into these kind of linear ideas of good and bad. And the injured party and the person who does wrong and all the rest of it. And so I think that's probably the conception that people have about it. It's much more complicated than that. We're animals, we're mammals, you know what I mean? And we've only been getting married. I mean, the modern Homo sapien has only been around for 150,000 years, and we've only been getting married for about 4,000 years, and we've only been getting married for romantic notions for the last 250 years. So this idea of romantic love and fidelity, and the idea that marriage is the person in your marriage is the person who can meet all of your needs, is a very modern romantic idea. It's only 250 years in the space of our long history here as a species, so it's very modern. It's very short.
So you're telling me it's okay?
No, I'm saying it's a lot more complicated in our DNA than just someone's bad for cheating. And I'm not saying that cheating is not a bad thing, or it doesn't cause a huge problem. Of course it does. I'm not saying that. But you're saying what's the biggest mistake people make, that they break it down to such simplistic terms.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And there's loads of reasons why people cheat. And there's people cheat for all sorts of reasons. It can be really immature, and it can be really about ego, and it can be really about all of those ideas. But it can also be about your attachments, your early childhood experiences, you know, Jennifer. And so rather than someone being a really bad person, there can be really fundamental cracks in someone's psyche about who they are and what they're about and how people love them and all the rest of it. And and for me, when I look at affairs, I talk about it and analyze it, and I chat with people about it. What I see, what the biggest cause of affairs is that in our midlife, I think in our mid-40s, 50s, we're more susceptible to having affairs.
You do hear that and see that in friends groups and in society, that, you know, the midlife crisis happens and people start looking elsewhere. But can we just define, like, what constitutes as cheating?
Well, that's the great thing about, that's the most, well, not great, but that's the most unbelievable thing about the idea of an affair. What do we mean by an affair? Is it sexting? Is it, emotionally connecting with somebody? Is it going for a massage and getting something at the end of that that's sexual? Is it sending images? Is it watching pornography?
Yes.
You know what I mean? What is it?
That's an interesting one, because I did see online a few weeks ago people talking about porn.
Yeah.
And that is a form of cheating.
Mm-hmm.
Where I would never consider that.
I wouldn't think that
I
is
wouldn't agree with
cheating
that either. But,
No.
you know,
No, I
everyone's
wouldn't.
different.
Everyone is different, and I know people who would feel that is somehow cheating on somebody,
Okay.
or pleasuring yourself while not thinking about your partner is cheating in some way. I would have met this in my clinic. I'm kind of going, my Lord above.
Wow.
That's not something that I would classify as an affair. An affair or cheating to me is the intersection of a prolonged emotional connection and a sexual one, as far as I see it. You know what I mean? I always talk about a one-night stand. Someone gets drunk and goes out and does. You know what I mean? So there's all different. It's the affair itself is beyond definition, really, and it's subjective. What do you mean?
Is it beyond definition, or should it be defined in a relationship?
Well,
Because you need to know your boundaries
Yeah.
and what other people are comfortable. And nowadays, a lot of people are having more open relationships and non-monogamous relationships, and there's all kinds of things going on.
Polyamorous.
Polyamorous, that's it. And
Couldn't think of anything more
going
exhausting.
to sex parties. Oh my God, it's
parties.
exhausting.
Dear Lord,
We've talked about it all.
I like to go
on the
home
pod.
after a party,
Yeah.
Jennifer. I'm tired.
You're exhausted. Even getting dressed up for one is exhausting.
God, I wouldn't know what you wear for that.
Do you think it's important that a couple define define what they think is
Cheating.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if your partner defines, you thinking about somebody else as cheating or looking at somebody else as cheating, I don't know, does that define, is that cheating?
Well, it is to them, but it's ridiculous, and then that relationship is inevitably going to break down.
Exactly.
I
It's a
would
bit coercive,
suspect.
yeah. Again, I just think about the affair itself. It's taboo. We don't talk about the fact that we have affairs, and we've been having affairs. You put Homo sapiens, I always say this, you put Homo sapiens into a room, and I guarantee you there'll be a transgression, because dopamine fires when you're with somebody that you like, oxytocin fires, all these lovely hormones and chemicals fire when you're around someone that you buzz with. And we all meet people that we haven't met before that we get on great with, and we have a lovely we have a good banter with them. And for me, what happens in affairs, why affairs are really around that 40s, kind of early 50s mark, is because we lose connection to an earlier self. This is what I would hear in my clinic all the time. She just made me feel. You know what I mean? That's the kind of sentence you hear. Right? She just made me feel. And it's not just only women now, Jennifer, because we love to think that this is another, when you say, well, what are the mistakes people have about affairs? I would say that we make it too linear in the ideas about wrong and right. And then we also think that women only have affairs because they have emotional desire and yearning, and men have affairs because they're fucking testosterone driven and they have to spread the seed.
Yeah.
Not at all. I mean, that's diminishing women as not having sexual desire or lust or it's ridiculous. It's that idea of a woman being passive and not, you know what I mean? That's that idea. And it's like, of course women have desire, passion and lust and all the rest of it. And so plenty, it's not just men who have affairs.
Yeah. Oh no. Yeah. We get that, I think.
They might be more.
Do you know what terrifies me?
Yeah.
And I've seen it, and I've read a book, Strangers, recently about it. Life story. But I've seen it in friends groups. The couple that seems so solid, and he's so nice, and he dotes on her, and he calls her my life partner, and and then
I'll be wary of those people.
Yeah, and then is that what it is? And then you hear that he's left, he's had an affair, he's with someone else, and he's abandoned his whole life, literally thrown a grenade in it. And I'm just using her. Of course, it can be a female, but in my experience over the last while, it's been the male. And it's why does that happen? Is it a midlife crisis? Is it something that happens in your mid-40s you were talking about there?
Yeah. So what I would say, like exactly that, right? And that's a little alarmed, because that's probably one of your greatest fears, that someone you have this deep relationship with someone and then they're gone, and it for sure happens, you know what I mean? And that's where your brain kind of processes that and trying to understand how could that happen. He was so doting to her, and I would always say, those public displays of affection overly might be a little warning sign, a little amber flag.
A little orange flag
a little orange flag there for sure. But generally what happens here, this is the really deep part about affairs, as I see it, is that you lose, your 40s are very tricky. You know yourself.
Are they? I'm having a bloody great time.
Are you?
Oh my God, it's the best decade.
Of your life?
Yeah.
Jesus.
I'm more confident now. I know myself. I'm more able to say no.
Yeah.
I'm having better sex. I have a more connected relationship.
Well, that's fantastic, Jennifer Zamparelli.
I thought that was everyone in their 40s.
You need to write that book, 40s and Fab. What I'd say is, like,
I thought 50s is going to be a shit show.
No, 50s is way better.
Is it?
The data would say your mid-40s are the hardest part of your life. 50s are better, and your 60s are absolutely fantastic altogether.
Really?
It's just the way I see your 40s, mid-40s particularly, is that, like, your parents are getting older, your kids are getting older, your kids are probably moving towards adolescence now. They're moving away from you. They're rejecting you. You're thinking about your career. You feel stretched, particularly if you're a woman. If you're the oldest daughter, you could be like that part of being the good daughter and looking after your parents need you more. Your intimacy generally drops down in your 40s. Jesus, I don't know what you're drinking there over there, Jennifer, but fair play to you. I think you need to come up with a product. Put all that into
Funny
that.
you should say that. No, but
you know what I mean?
Okay, so generally
it's
a
generally
tricky...
exhausting, and it's generally, the data would say 40s are generally exhausting. Generally, you lose connection with that earlier self. I ask women in my clinic a lot, what was the last thing you laughed at? And it's a profound silence. Right, so they lose contact with that funny, self and all the rest of it because it's just a chore. And then the routine and the regularity of life, and nothing kills intimacy like routine, familiarity. I mean, nothing, because we all start out in a relationship in an affair. That's the way I always think about it. When you start off in a relationship, it's a bit of an affair because you're separated by distance. You're getting to know each other for the first time. It might be for first time you're physical with somebody, whatever it is. That's all really exciting. That's an affair. But as we all know, unlike Jennifer Zamparelli, as we all know, that generally that might dip a little nadir in your 40s.
Well, you see, I gave up the radio. I have time now to work on my relationship.
Exactly.
I've loads of time. This is great. It's like,
for the rest of us fools running around the place.
Yeah, give up your job. You'll have better sex. No, I
but you
totally
hear what I'm saying?
get it.
And then somebody in your workplace comes into it.
Yeah.
And they reconnect you with an earlier self where you were funny, you were having you were a better self was there, and you lose yourself, I think, in that 40s. And then when you meet somebody, or if you're on a holiday, or you're out with the lads golfing, or whatever goes on, and you have a one-night stand or whatever it is, it's kind of frenzied because you've met someone who made you feel good about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
And is that the main... That's where it happens, isn't it? We hear the workplace, they've met someone else in work.
Yeah.
They're spending so much time with them.
Well, you see, we're living in an age where it's never been more likely that you can reconnect with old lovers too. Like, you know what I mean? Facebook, Meta, Instagram, TikTok, whatever it is. Yeah. Someone texting going, hey, you're getting on, Richard? See, you're kind of going, oh God, Jesus, I remember when I was 17. You have much more opportunity to reconnect, but you've also got way more opportunity, this is what I would say, to get caught. The amount of children that are on their parents' phone playing a game or whatever it is, and the message comes in. That has been something remarkable in my clinic. The amount of affairs that have been revealed as a result of technology being linked to other stuff, or kids just on the phone and seeing a message come in.
That must be very traumatizing for a kid to see.
It's terrible for children. I mean, I discovered my own father was having an affair when I was in my teens. And I found that was just devastating in my mind, my psychology as a kid.
And the pressure of what to do.
I didn't know what to do. My grandmother lived with us, and I adored this woman, a good, great Cork woman. She lived with us for 20 years, and I was thinking, what the hell, if I expose this affair, will she have to move out? Can we afford to live together?
Oh my God.
All that's why I said nothing. I kept it to myself for a long time. Didn't know what to do with it. And then it created this unshakable idea in my head that people will cheat on you. People are, infidelity was a real problem in my mind for so many years. So it's devastating for kids, and parents will often say to me, particularly the injured parent will say to me in my clinic, should I tell the kids about the affair? I'm saying, but what's your outcome goal here? What are you hoping for? I get you want to align the kids, and you want the kids to know what a bastard mom or dad is. But ultimately, you're destroying your kid's psychology, because no child wants to think about their father or mother's sexual life.
Oh God, no.
God, no.
No.
You know what I mean?
Jesus, no.
And so it's like an affair. That's what I'd always say when I'm working with this and I'm talking about it. It's devastating for the family unit.
Yeah.
I don't think anything is more catastrophic for it. Like, it's the reason why we divorce. It's the reason why we separate. It's the biggest reason why we break up the family unit. And if we understood the devastation of what that brings into our children's lives and into our own life, if I'm being honest, when I look at the data and all the rest of it, what you bring into your own life,
So let's talk about this, because I know you're big
Yeah.
on this and writing a book about this. Attachment styles. We know that attachment styles and the relationships you have growing up can impact your behavior in an adult relationship.
Absolutely.
Can you just explain this for people?
Yeah, so that's John Bowlby, 1956, whatever, attachments. And it basically means there's four main attachment styles. And really, the people who have affairs are generally the ones who have an anxious attachment or disorganized attachment, right? And so they would have learned very early in their lives that love is conditional. And they would have learned about themselves that they're not enough and that they have to constantly change themselves. This is why people are people pleasers. This is why you're enjoying your 40s, Jennifer. You've moved out of the people pleasing phrase, right? And I work with women in their 40s all the time, helping them to figure out this kind of thing.
Yeah.
Because you learn, I think we do it to women particularly, we turn them into this idea of being a carer and, your only role here is to say yes and to be agreeable and to be a good girl. You know what I mean? When I'm up at the GA and I hear "good girl," it makes my skin kind of crawl. The idea of saying that to someone, and so it's that idea about you learn very quickly that you're not enough and that you have to constantly shift yourself to please others. What a destructive paradigm, right? And so then think about that as you grow up. You have a belief that you're not enough, and then you look around. There's a thing called the reticular activating system in the brain, which kind of filters out stuff. And so you're looking to be agreeable, and you're looking for evidence that you're good, and that your only worth is how people perceive you. There's no sense of you; it's how people perceive you that makes you feel good.
Yeah.
And so then you go off into relationships, and you meet someone who makes you feel good about yourself. You can see what happens, and all of a sudden, you get a massive hit of dopamine or whatever it is, and you feel brilliant about yourself, and you're very susceptible to an affair there with a disorganized attachment. You came out of a family that had addiction in it, more than likely, or something like that, and so then you'd look for chaotic environments, and so you might be in a marriage, right? And I've heard this so many times in my clinic. It's a terrible thing to hear. They'd say it was all going well, and I just looked around for something to crowbar it.
Yeah.
It's all going well. That guy you're talking about. It's all going well. Everything was lovely. But I just decided, how do I stick a crowbar?
How do I blow this up?
How do I blow this up? Because it all going well. And it's something I had to figure out myself, because I knew I had the tendency to be like that when I was 17, 18, 19, 20. I knew that. And I was trying to figure out how to get out of that mindset of blowing shit up, and bringing chaos into your life. And it took me a while to figure that stuff out. When you grew up in a family, addiction and affairs and all that kind of stuff.
How do you, recognizing it, I suppose, is step one. But then how do you take your hand off the big red button? Like, how do you...
Well,
is it avoidable is what I'm trying to ask.
You see, for a lot of people, it isn't really, because they don't even understand what they're doing. It's subconscious.
And that's why it's so painful for the other parties.
That's why I'm saying about the misidea or the misapprehension or perception about it, is that you're a bad person, or because you don't understand the fundamental cracks that exist in people.
Yeah.
And the lack of sense of self, and the destruction that people brings into their life because of the destruction they grew up in, and what's familiar to them. And I often sit with kids who are alcoholics, children of alcoholics, and they find sitting in the clinic incredibly difficult. I always use the word, they have to endure the peace there, because the peace is something they've never experienced. They're used to a plate going through the window. They're used to the doors slamming. They're used to being called things. They're used to aggression. And so sitting in a peaceful room like this would be really awkward or uncomfortable. And that's a lot of people who go off into the world, That's a lot of people who go off into relationships.
Would you say more so in Ireland with our history with addiction? And
we have had a really awful relationship with alcohol.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's getting better, and I can hear it amongst teenagers that they don't drink as much, as heavily as they would have done when I was a teenager and all that. But yeah, I think for years as well, the idea of like what it was to be a good dad or to be a present dad wasn't even an idea.
Mm-mm.
You know what I mean? I can't, when I think about like life and that, and I'm writing about that at the moment, I couldn't think of anything worse than being down in a pub, my family at home, and I'm down in the pub putting coins up on the counter, because I saw my dad doing that, and I'd hear him talking about Charlie Haughey. This was the 80s.
Yeah.
I'd hear all the names, Charlie Haughey and all the rest of it, and all these hurlers, and you'd hear all the talk.
You're there with your red lemonade and your packet of crisps in the bar.
Feckin'.
I know. It's crazy when you think about it. But that was a lot. I mean, we're not unique in a way.
No,
like that was a lot of our childhoods, wasn't it? It was just the way things
were. And I often say this, how lucky am I now to grow up in a time where to be a dad is celebrated? We need to celebrate a bit more. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
When I'm down in the school, I remember that when my kids were younger, down in the infant school, I'd see all the dads with the LOL bags in their back. I would think to myself, isn't this feckin' amazing?
It's great.
Isn't it
great? And actually, just on that that subject, we took our children to see the Michael Jackson movie.
Oh yeah, Michael.
And
Yeah, I
the
did too.
biggest thing that my son, who's 8, got out of it, he turned to my husband now and says, "Dad, I really love you. You're a really good dad," because he recognised how
The
terrible
Joseph Jackson was.
Joseph
My own daughter
Jackson
said the same to me too.
There you go.
And I said to her, if you don't
Really?
start singing properly, I'm going to get that belt.
I'm going to get you singing lessons. Just some of the excuses. I mean, that attachment style, and that takes a deep dive to recognise that and to really see that. But what about the one night stands? Let's see the flippancy of those, and I was drunk, I was high, it just happened. Can being drunk ever be a viable excuse?
Well, I don't think it can be. In vino veritas, in wine there's truth. And, sometimes we drink to allow ourselves to do the things that we want to do, but we find we can't do when we're sober or whatever it is. And just looking at those attachments and all these, it's not an excuse for having an affair, but it gives you context. It gives you a bit of context about why people cheat and all that. It doesn't excuse it, and it's not an excuse, but it does give you context for people who are very damaged. Some people are quite damaged.
And I suppose for people listening, because I know a lot of people, I said you were coming on today and we were going to have this chat, and I had a lot of messages just on my Instagram. And I think there's a lot of people out there who didn't have the opportunity to do therapy, whatever, and they're feeling a little lost, and they just want answers.
Exactly.
So talking about this, hopefully it will give some people, or explain a couple of things, and they can come up with the answers.
And alcohol isn't an excuse for having an affair, you know what I mean? And often the desire to have an affair is a very immature, childish thing. You know what I mean? It often is just an impulse, an ego thing, and whatever, someone gives you attention and off you go.
Fantasy?
A little bit of that. And the idea that you're unique and special, that somebody else would look at you and all that. And as my mother-in-law has been saying to me for 20 odd years now, anyone, she says this to me, anyone can have an affair. I think she's trying to say, don't think you're special if someone gives you any attention. Because, she's...
That is so good.
It's good advice, isn't it? Anyone can have an affair.
You don't think you're special because somebody gives you attention.
I always wink at her, and I say, you're dead right. You're dead right, girl. She's saying that to me for years.
She is.
Because I think that's what happens to particularly men, maybe. They feel a little bit like, oh my God, I can't believe this person is giving me a bit of attention. Aren't I just amazing that a woman or a girl would give me this attention? You're kind of going, well, my mother-in-law would say, no, you're not that amazing. You're not that amazing. Grow up.
You're not that special. Anyone can have an affair.
But again, we have to think about the consequences of our behaviour. You know what I mean? All behaviour is consequences. And when you choose a behaviour, you're choosing all of that fucking consequence. And so you have to think about that. And I'd often say affairs are... Because we're living in this really ultra-individualistic era.
What do you mean by that?
It's like we're told all the time, do what makes you happy and do more of what makes you happy. And I'm like, well, frickin' hell, if you just lived in that moment of doing what makes you happy in the moment, your life would be in chaos and it would be an awful life. You have to delay gratification. Most of the time as an adult, you have to work in the interest of your future self. When I think of happiness, I'm happy now sitting here today because I've done things in my past here that have put me into a position where I'm okay to be feeling good. But if I'd crowbarred my life there a couple of weeks ago because I saw whatever it was and she was beautiful and I decided to go...
And you went for it.
And I went for it. And you're kind of going, Jesus, what a way to live. That's misery. That's absolute misery. Not working in that interest of who you want to be and how you want to be in the world and all that. That's a real sense of I don't know.
Let's talk about how we perceive cheating, because it is often dressed up on the big screen as being fun and sexy, and quite common. So are we sometimes...
Exhausting, Jennifer, exhausting.
Yeah, but are we sometimes inspired to cheat? Is there an element, like I said before, fantasy that people are tapping into there?
I think so. I do think there's the whole element of fantasy, and I think the idea of the affair being taboo, the idea of the affair itself is alluring. It's outside society in some ways, and it's secretive, and there's deception involved, and someone's craving you, and all the rest. You know what I mean? And so there's that whole idea is alluring to people, for sure. Again, that's what I would say is a bit of an immature idea when you really break it down,
Yeah.
When I used to do this when I was working, and I'd often work with people in addiction, I talked to them about, when they were going to get heroin, and they'd say to me, please don't talk about it, because they get a buzz out of the idea. They're almost getting more of a buzz.
Anticipation,
exactly.
The beforehand.
Exactly.
Yeah,
they're getting a buzz out of getting the idea of scoring, right? And so the idea of actually, say, physically scoring is a buzz. And then when you break it down and say, well, what was that really? And I feel going, stop talking about it because you're kind of killing it, if you know what I mean. And I worked with this guy there recently, and he said to me, I lost interest in cheating. No, this is a true sentence. He said to me, I lost interest in cheating when my partner became okay with the idea of me sleeping around. So there's something in the taboo.
Yeah.
You know, there's something in the
Not being allowed.
secretive, not being allowed, being
Yeah.
outside society, being outside kind of like normal discourse, and being secretive and deceptive, and being the only one who's doing it, and having someone who, you know, secretly desires you and all the rest of it. That's kind of alluring.
And if you find that really alluring in your mid-40s, not for me, it's going to be my 50s, but if that is intriguing and that excites you, there's other things you can do.
Yeah, there is. And I would say, you know, again, you know, we lose contact with our partner. We can lose contact with our partner in our 40s. The most important thing of all of this is in communication
Yeah.
and staying open with someone and bringing a little bit of spice into your life.
It's work.
Yeah. Well, it is to keep everything kind of
Yeah.
ticking along, and not to talk about the kids, because you can become mom or dad so, you know, it's one thing my wife always said, you say about boundaries. I was like, I'd never call her like mother, you know, or she won't say father, you know, daddy. She will,
That's a big ick.
I couldn't,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, look at somebody and think, oh man, that's desirable. Mommy is
Yeah.
going up the stairs. No, you know what I mean? So I've been trying to, when we go for dinner and we go for drinks and all that, we would say, let's not talk about the kids tonight. Let's just be Richard and Erica, who dated 25 years ago. And let's be those guys who've built this life together. But like, let's stay.
25 years.
Yeah.
It's good innings.
It's a good innings. Yeah.
That is very good. I have a lot of messages I want to get through as well. But
Sure.
what are the long-term effects of being the person who has been cheated on?
Well, it depends what you mean by, are you in the are you staying in the relationship? Are you?
Let's say if you are not, and I'm sure like dating again and all that, there's going to be problems
Well,
there.
you'll find it very hard to trust, right?
Yeah.
Here's the things that happen, Jennifer. When you have, this is why I think of an affair is not something to enter into lightly, right? I'd often get people ringing my clinic asking me about this. Honestly, they'd ring
Okay.
and they'd ask me. They'd say, "I'm thinking about having an affair. What would you think?" And I'm kind of going, well, if you're asking me to absolve you of your thing, I was like, that's not my position. I'd be asking really important questions. You know,
What kind of questions are you asking them?
I would say to them, you know, what is it that you're trying to find in this particular relationship that you don't find in your relationship currently? Can you find that in your relationship? Is the relationship over and this is a soft landing for you? You know, I'd ask them those questions. I said, here's the questions for you to think about, because I can't give you a yes or no on that. That's for your life and you have to figure that out. But here's things to think about. I would not enter into it lightly, because nothing destroys the family system. And if you've got kids in there, nothing's going to destroy that. If you're in a very unhappy marriage, that's something to think about. And maybe if you're being authentic, maybe leaving that marriage and trying to find something in your life, that might be the thing to move towards, rather than bringing an affair in and bringing all of this misery into everybody around you.
Have you ever gone, go for it?
No. I'd never say go for it, don't go for it. Because I have a bias on it, because I lived through it as a kid and all the rest of it. I obviously have a bias and prejudice around it, but I see it clinically, and I see it through the research, and I see it through all my studies that I do. It never ends well, you know.
No. And often if you see it and you think, oh, well, maybe that's the love of his life or the love of her life, you always find that relationship diminishes quite quickly, and then they're alone or they move on or whatever.
It's funny, I was talking about this to someone recently. I remember watching Walk the Line, the Johnny Cash movie, and I was the only one in the movie with all my friends going, what about his fucking first wife? It's like, I had her, I was like, Jesus Christ. He met you and got her, and she was just left at home with all these kids. That's where my mind was. I was like, what about her? She doesn't make the cut in the story. I was like, Jesus, her story is pretty important here. But anyway, so I think,
does the cheater walk away scot-free?
I don't know. Sometimes.
Sometimes?
Sure. Yeah, sometimes. But if you're the person who's been cheated on, here's things that you'll come to. I think it's an existential crisis. Was I ever loved? Was anything ever real? Did they ever really, when they said that, was that real? You know, was it all lies? I mean, that's a fundamental crack in your belief system. So it's an awful thing to experience that. And for that person who's wrote that question, I would say the shame is not you, and the shame is not for you to take that on. That's somebody else's. Somebody cheated. That was their lack of whatever it was, or whatever reason they did that. That was for them to take that on, not for you. And you have to work at trusting again, because not everyone's a cheater. There are plenty of good people out there, plenty of decent people out there. And I would say, you know, have faith, take a gamble on people, because what often happens, Jennifer, as an intervention for that, is you don't date again. Because that was so much pain, your body kind of goes, avoid that. And I would say, no, that's a terrible legacy, and that's terrible power to give to somebody who's hurt you.
Oh, well said.
Take that power back and say, no, you know what? That was them. That was their shame, not mine. And an affair is never about the person. It's about themselves and what they're going through. And so that's that's their shame and whatever that is there. So pick yourself up again and go dating again.
And therapy would definitely
Yeah, it
help
would. Yeah, to work all that stuff out. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so what's your advice to couples who are navigating a cheating scandal in their relationship?
Yeah, okay.
This is big.
That's huge. For the person who has cheated, let's say, the biggest mistake that person makes, as I see it, is looking for forgiveness too quickly and wanting quick forgiveness on their terms almost, right? And you have to allow your partner to experience what they're going through. It's a bit of a grief. It's the death of that earlier relationship. And they will have all those questions, and being transparent is really important, and sitting down and having these conversations. Can the relationship survive? Absolutely. I've known relationships to be better. Now, I'm not prescribing affairs, but they can be better, because whatever's in that relationship that brought them to this point, it's never going to be the same again. So it can be a hard full stop. You know what I mean? And so this nearly breaking up is like, and getting back together is like the antidote of the death of the relationship. And so there can be a vitality and a vibrance coming out of this thing. But asking the right questions for the person who's been cheated on. You know, you remember Friends when Ross has that one night stand with the girl from the Xerox? Remember?
Yeah.
And Rachel says, was she better than me? And Ross says, well, no one likes change, right? It's a nice, funny moment, you know what I mean, in that whole thing. But they're not the right questions to be asking. What was she like? What did you like about her? What kind of sex was it? You know, was
What
it
has she got that I don't have?
No, I would be asking much more important questions. What was it that you saw in her that you didn't see here? And what was it that you wanted there that you couldn't get here? And do you want to have this relationship? And what do you think this relationship would look like if we were going forward with this relationship? What do you think it's going to look like? And also an important thing, don't you think I could have had an affair like my mother would always say? Of course I could, but I put you first and I put the family first. But you didn't, you know? And why not? And do you want to stay together? And if we are going to stay together, what's that going to look like? And it's never going to be what it was. It's a different relationship now. You know, so it can be empowering in some ways.
And do you think it gives the other person liberty, the person who was cheated on, to check their phone every now and again? To
see,
how does that all play out at home? In the reality, in the cold light of day.
Yeah, that's kind of where it can play out. And then that's probably the slow move towards the end of the relationship. You know what I mean? That's an incremental catastrophe in the relationship, I think. And of course, it's normal. You've been so profoundly hurt by somebody. And of course, I'd be trying to think about going to therapy and trying to figure that out, and letting your partner hear your feelings and being open about your feelings and not holding back on what you felt and how you feel and how you still worry about cheating and how you still feel when the text comes in. You know, because that's what people feel. Then
or when
buzzes.
They're out late at night or they're away.
The trust takes a long time to rebuild. And you only rebuild that. There's nothing you can say in that. The only way that's going to build that is through your behaviour, by being a trustworthy person. You know what I mean? And time. Well, that's what I'm saying. But by evidence of how you behave, that's going to make someone, amygdala, the warning system, calm down, because you can see, right, they made a mistake, they fucked up here. You know, I think any of us, I think, can have a bad moment in life. You know what I mean? Make a bad decision for whatever reason, for however you're feeling, whatever's going on. I think anyone can. You know, I don't think anyone is free from bad decisions and bad moments in your life. I think we all have those, and we all have a capacity to mess up our lives dramatically. But if we're open and we communicate and we don't rush forgiveness and we take acknowledgement of what we did and we take responsibility, not trying to diminish it, say, well, it was only twice, you know, and you're trying to diminish, you know, just being transparent and being open and being absolutely, you know, transparent is the word about what happened, and allowing for your partner to grieve, because there's a bit of grief there, and to express their feelings. And then slowly through time, you'll start to move through it.
Okay, we have some listener questions.
Sure.
Are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's go.
I want to go to the most recent ones that I got on my Instagram. Okay, so please keep me anonymous. Part 1. Here we go. I was the side piece. I'm not proud of it. I feel so much shame. I'm trying to walk away, but he keeps pulling me back in. We're friends as well. I don't have many friends, and I keep going back when I get lonely, and then I feel more shame. How do I get out of this cycle?
Really good question. And I've met that person many times in my life. And I would say your confidence is something that you need to look at.
Okay.
Right. And what really stood out to me there is the word lonely. Right. And so I meet some people who come to my clinic and they're trying to almost present it as something that's kind of, it's a desirable position to be in. You're the other person. You're more desirable than the partner,
Yeah.
but you're not caught up in the kind of, the rigmarole of a relationship. You're outside that orthodox relationship kind of thing. So you're enjoying it. And they might think they're really enjoying this thing, but really when you dig into it, there's a fundamental crack in their sense of confidence. That they don't value themselves enough to say, you know what, you don't get to, be with me as you want, because obviously, there's not going to be a relationship here. And so you're just using me. And so that person is using you for whatever. We might have a relationship with them, but they're using you. And you have to think about that and get more confidence around what you want in life, and think about what kind of a partner you do want to value you. What I said about an anxious attachment, you don't value yourself. You only value yourself as a side piece, as a kind of a subplot here in this person's life. And I would say you need to become the main plot in your life and meet somebody that can respect you and value you, and get the hell away from this guy. If it is a guy, I don't know, but it sounds like it. And I'd say get the hell away from them, because if they really were your friend, they wouldn't be positioning you like this.
Exactly. Here's another one. Discovered my husband was getting erotic massages for 3 years.
Oh, yeah.
What? Now, is that like a happy ending type job?
Must be, yeah.
Okay, what do you think of that?
I've met that so many times in recent years.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Is that down to boundaries? Like, is that down to what?
I think it's down to pornography.
Okay.
To be honest, like I talk about this all the time, and I hate talking about it, but I'm an advocate for action against pornography. You know what I mean? Because I think, particularly for children growing up, it creates this stuff. It disrupts their ideas about intimacy. It ruptures relationships. The amount of relationships that break down because of pornography is unbelievable, but no one talks about it, right? Because intimacy is like going meet your friend for a drink, and going off to do these taboo things is like taking heroin. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so dopamine is really firing when you go off for your massage, and when you're with your partner at night in bed, no dopamine is firing. And it's just like and your partner's lying going, what the hell, am I not attractive anymore? Do they not desire me? They're just desiring taboo things there. And are they asking me, can they build their life or a relationship back after that? Or what are they kind of saying?
That's all they said. That's all they said in the message. Discovered my husband was getting erotic massages for 3 years, and a sad face.
Yeah. And I think that's probably is pornography. I again, as a couple, I'd be going to a couples therapist to try to figure that out, about how to bring intimacy back into your life that isn't that. And because that's cheating, as far as I would see it personally,
Yeah.
And so you've been cheated on there by your husband, and I'd be trying to have that conversation around that. Are they still active in that behavior?
Have you confronted them?
Yeah, have you confronted them? Have you had the conversation about why are you doing that? What were you finding that activity that we couldn't do here together and have a massage in the bed together? That also you're promoting, because I work with Ruama and I work with Women's Aid. You're also promoting, the sex trafficking and all that kind of stuff. When you get involved in that stuff, have you thought about that? Your role in all of that. And
I don't think he's thought about that.
No,
Richard.
I don't think he has. And when I'm talking to boys, particularly, I always talk about this stuff with them.
Okay.
Because you can blindly think that that's just a harmless thing. That person wants money, then I'm just going to give them money for this. And that's all a harmless kind of thing. But it's not. It's absolutely not. And there's often a very, very, very clear victim involved in this whole thing.
Absolutely.
And so you're promoting that without sounding too self-righteous and all that. But, you have to be clear about what your behaviors are doing there. And I would be having that conversation with them. Also, they're putting your health at risk, maybe, and all the rest of it. And so these are big things to not let this conversation happen.
You have been cheated on.
Yes,
I mean, that's very clear.
Yeah.
Here's another one. Cheated on for 5 years by my partner who was living a double life.
Jesus.
Whoa. I've seen this.
That used to be the 80s kind of guy.
Yeah. Personality disorder? Question mark?
Narcissism, maybe. Yeah. Well, again, are they saying what to do? Are they in the relationship with the person? You know what I mean? If you find, I would say they're probably not still in a relationship with them. You just
is that the hardest thing to deal with? I mean, someone turns around and goes, "I have another family."
Well, you've got a sociopath on your hands there,
right?
You know what I mean? 0.12% of the population, and only a point something of those will do something very negative and bad. That's somebody that is crazy. That is
crazy deceit,
scary stuff there, right? And I would say get as far away from that person. Get them into your rearview mirror. Don't analyze it too much. You met a sociopath there. Get the hell away. Look for someone decent. And, get away from that.
Okay. I've started seeing someone who told me that they've cheated in 2 of their previous relationships. I like her and I'm enjoying getting
Too
to
much
know her.
information.
But I know that this is a bit of a red flag.
Once a
this guy
cheater,
says, or
always a
girl
cheater.
says.
This is my mother-in-law would also say. She's a great woman for platitudes. I don't particularly agree with that.
You don't agree with that one?
No, I don't.
I don't
no.
agree with that one either.
No, I think you can have relationships where you've cheated and you can have a relationship where you haven't cheated. And I think the fact that they told you that they cheated in previous relationships shows a level of intimacy and honesty that, I don't, if you were actively going to think about that, doing that again, if that's a part of you, who you are, I don't think you'd share that. What do you think? I wouldn't share
I
that.
agree. And also you said that relationships can survive infidelity.
Absolutely. But I don't think if the person was thinking about, or if interested in other people, they'd tell you that piece of information. I think that shows a kind of an intimacy between the two of you, a connection between the two of you, and maybe shows how deep your relationship is with that person. You're going to have to trust them.
You're going to have to do it. So it's Amber.
I don't even think. I think it's honesty.
Fine.
Yeah. I think she's
honesty
been honest.
is good.
Yeah.
Honesty is good.
And I think it reflects on how she feels about you.
I've been cheated on a few years ago in a previous relationship and have just met somebody new. I really don't want to sabotage what we seem to have, but I also feel like I need to explain my boundaries, expectations, and where they've come from. When is the right time to do this without coming across as a bit mad?
Yeah. See, what you don't want to do here is like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because you've been cheated on, then you're going to be heightened in your vigilance around somebody, and that nothing's going to drive someone away from you than heightened vigilance and checking things and being overly, worried about people going out and asking them who you're with, who you're talking to now, and all of that stuff destroys the relationship. It's corrosive. You're going to have to take control of not having control of your partner, and that gives you control. When you're trying to control everything and understand them so much, it drives them away. It's a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. Your fear is that they'll cheat on you, but the way you act in the relationship drives them away, whether they cheat or not, but it pushes them away. And that's because you're hurt by what happened before. I'd say try to figure that out, maybe talk to somebody to figure out that bit of hurt, but that's not your new partner. And kind of go into that open and trust them. Trust somebody until they show you that they can't be trusted.
If you have suspicions that your partner is cheating, what is the best way to unlock their phone? No, what's the best way to deal with that?
Generally, they'd say if you have suspicions, generally it might be what's happening. Again, I would always say communication is the most important thing in any part of life here as a Homo sapien, is how we communicate to each other. Mm-hmm. I would communicate that. And try to understand and see what they say. Now, if they're very deceptive and all the rest of it, you're going to have to figure out what you want out of a relationship. Do you want to be with a person who makes you feel insecure all the time about, being cheated on? Is that the relationship you want to have? That's exhausting. That's exhausting, yeah.
Okay, and very important, what advice do you give to parents who are going through a separation as a result of infidelity?
First of all, we can live in a very anti-family society that says separation and divorce does not hurt children or upset children. It does. It absolutely does. It doesn't have to traumatize them. That's the difference. That's the distinction, right? And I've worked with this, and I'm a child of parents who separate and all the rest of it, and a child of infidelity and all that. It doesn't have to traumatize them. How you behave in that separation, because it sounds like they are separating. How you behave, keep the children out of adult teams, right? The best outcome here is that you all move on with your lives and you all go back into relationships and you all have a lovely load of life ahead of you, and you have a lovely relationship, and you see what a really great relationship can be like, and one without infidelity, and that's the best outcome. And the kids are co-parented by these two people who loved each other at one point and brought these beautiful kids into life. What happens is parents bring kids into adult teams. They tell one of the children about the affairs that were going on or how they were left down.
To get them on side.
And to show them that they're the victim and the other person is a bastard, basically, whatever. Yeah. And so that's the trauma. You know what I mean? That is the trauma for children. No child wants to know any of that stuff, right? So don't do that. How you talk to them about your separation is really important. And I'd sit down with them together. This is possible. You're trying to put your feelings about the affair aside. Of course, it's complicated and hurt, and you feel profoundly let down and all that. But you've got these kids in front of you, and you don't want them to be just really damaged going through life and impacting who they marry and all this misery, the legacy of this misery that can go on and on and on and on and on intergenerationally. And so you have to put that behind you and say to you for a moment, and sit down with your partner and say, "We love you guys. You know, we brought you into life because we love each other. We still love each other. This is what I would do.
Just say it.
This is what I
Even
would
if
do
you don't mean it.
if I was leaving my wife. If my wife was leaving me for some wonderfully beautiful
Hot guy
28
from Malahide,
hot
tennis
guy
player.
from New Zealand rugby team. I'm like, geez, I can't even beat him up, the fucker.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I'd sit down and I'd say, you know, Mom and myself love each other. We still love each other. But as you know, we've been finding it hard to live together, and we're gonna take a break and see how we live apart and how we can be a family still, but not living under the same roof. Because we love you guys, we adore you in your lives and blah, blah, blah. But we're just, plenty, as you know yourself, guys, friends, many of your friends are separated. We're gonna separate for the moment and see how this kind of works. And maybe it might be better for us all. And that's what we're trying here. So the kids don't feel like it's anything to do with me. It's anything that parents are just struggling with their intimate relationship.
And no matter how much of a bastard he was, or how much of a see you next Tuesday she was, and whoever cheated, they don't want to hear you badmouth them.
No,
they just
never. And even if they come home and they say, "Oh my Christ, Mom would drive you mad. She's such a nag," you never
Don't
go,
get
"Well,
involved.
that's your mother now, Fia."
Yeah.
That's what I had to live with for 25 years. Never. I mean, that is the trauma, Jennifer. Honestly, that's where kids become disturbed for life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that goes off into their lives, into relationships, into their friendships, into every aspect of their life. It metastasizes and destroys them. And so I'd say never badmouth your parent. And even if the other parent is badmouthing you, let's say if you've got a husband there that's badmouthing you all the time, don't go down to their level. You know what I mean? And say, I'd only say, well, Dad, finding it hard to process all of this stuff, and just try to hold that. That's all I'd say to him. Try to hold that and try not to listen to that. Dad's a good guy. I'd always be trying to that, because your kids will see as they grow up and their cognition becomes more sophisticated. They'll see what went on here and what was right or wrong.
I think we've covered a lot of ground here. Thank you so much. And I hope it has been helpful to people out there, whatever you're going through. So, Richard, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.